So my problem with instinctive archery video has prompted some positive engagement with the nuances of the style and method, raising questions over what people are actually doing and how they define it. These kinds of questions can be very divisive and bring up passionate arguments. So let's not waste any time and move straight to pissing off the entire traditional archery community. I'm going to open the same way. Is this traditional? Same checklist. I'm not using sights, bonus points for using thumb draw, and I'm Asian. I'm literally Justin Ma at this point.
Archery, best feeling in whole world.
Except, depending on how you define traditional, this isn't traditional, this isn't traditional, this specific bit isn't traditional, heck, it's supposed to look like this. Like with the instinctive video, this isn't an issue with traditional archery itself, but with what people define and understand to be traditional. Unlike instinctive archery, where it's really a semantic argument that doesn't really matter as long as you use what works for you, the disagreements over traditional archery have wider ramifications. As before, let's start with the issues around defining traditional archery. On the surface, it seems really easy. If it looks like this or this, it's traditional. Old-fashioned stick and string, no modern materials, no compound bows or recurve sights, that's the easy part. The term traditional is generally understood to mean practices that have vaguely always been done. Cultural traditions may have been inherited over hundreds of years, but your tradition of playing Magic the Gathering every Friday could be considered a tradition too. The Maori tradition of performing the haka before a match may one day be equivalent to spamming emotes to initiate a duel in a video game. But how far back do you go for something to be traditional? Would you say 1960? If you do online shopping for traditional bows, you come across these types. Whenever you see someone shooting traditional on YouTube, it's this kind of bow. This is the ubiquitous traditional bow, even though it only came about in the mid-20th century, the same period as the first metal bows made from magnesium and aluminium, which today have advanced to high-grade aluminium alloy and carbon. But this traditional bow is quite different from the straight stave longbows and Asiatic style bows. Notably, the common feature is the window, allowing the arrow to be rested on the shelf instead of the knuckle, providing more clearance for the arrow and opening up the sight picture. So, how did this become associated with traditional archery? While Mad Jack Churchill was shooting world championships and Nazis, the Americans brought over the English longbow and made it better. Then archery legend Howard Hill did his bit to shoot championships, elephants and apples, cementing what we refer to as Hill-style longbows, which would then take shape in the center shot longbows and recurves we see as trad bows today. The modern concept of a traditional bow comes from this lineage, the American longbow. The popularity was driven by the American pastime of hunting, in turn driving the demand for the manufacture of American bows, and the archery industry that is still evident today, with the bow market being largely orientated towards hunting. Understanding this heritage is a cool part of history, fairly recent history, but an important part of archery history. As long as we can agree that this is specifically an American traditional archery style, that's fine. But then there's the rest of the world. Here's the thing, in the Western and specifically the English-speaking world, the image of a traditional archer is either Robin Hood to the layperson or American-style longbows and recurves. But if you turn up to a club in the UK, Australia or the US with an Asiatic bow, you're going to get some very weird looks. That doesn't look anything like the normal traditional bows, and you're using the wrong side. This sometimes presents an awkward interaction between Eastern and Western archery, with the dominant perception being that of Western traditional, even though Eastern traditional has a far older heritage. But because the Eastern style is the different one, we often have to go out of our way to explain it or avoid using the term traditional. I've even been involved in debates where some people try to argue that historical archery is not traditional archery, as in Korean traditional archery is not traditional. But the point is true, because traditional archery is so closely associated with Americana, the language used to describe non-American traditional bows changes. You can't search for a traditional bow like this one on Google or Amazon without calling it a horse bow, which is the wrong name for these bows. Sometimes it has to be more demeaning, like a primitive or exotic bows. I suppose though, it is what it is. It's an exceptional bow type being marketed to a largely American audience, so you have to differentiate it. In a positive spin, we're growing more comfortable in using the term Asiatic to refer to these traditional bows, though with few content creators teaching the form on the internet, it's still rather niche. But at least we can proudly and equally shoot together in traditional events. Wait, no. In 2021, World Archery released a rule classification on thumb rings, which are used in Asiatic traditional archery. Thumb rings are not allowed. This kind of makes sense, especially given that World Archery is derived from the Western European archery lineage, and no one competed with a thumb ring or an Asiatic bow in the recurve division. But the wording might be a faux pas. We do not believe that adding another division in World Archery is in the best interest of the sport. Oof. And I still kind of get this. World Archery is not the governing body for traditional archery. It's the one for modern sport archery. There are other traditional archery governing bodies out there, albeit far more fragmented and often exclusive to each other. No one's going to try to qualify for the Olympics with an Asiatic bow. The differences in standards are worlds apart. The problem is that many national level associations derive their rules from World Archery's model. That means if you go to a target archery club and want to shoot Asiatic, you can't. The rules don't allow for thumb rings, and specifically, they have to use the Mediterranean finger draw. Traditional archery is not the same and not equal. The rules actively block out the introduction of Asiatic bows. Rules only change when there is an impetus for it, but since they are not allowed at all, there will be no cause for change. This doesn't mean change is impossible. Archery GB has introduced the Asiatic division, specifying its own set of rules, elaborating on being as open as possible, allowing either modern or natural materials for the bow, and arrows can be wood, aluminium, or carbon, which is not the same for their traditional divisions that only allow wood. Hey, for once, Asiatic archery has an edge over Western traditional. And I kind of get this too. There's a desire to preserve legacy styles the way they were, frozen in time, to contrast them with the modern mainstream divisions. There's a point when there's no difference between a trad bow and a modern bow, so you have to draw the line in materials, equipment, and shooting methods. It just kind of sucks that in some events I'm not allowed to use carbon arrows, which is often cheaper and easier to match to a bow, and instead I have to switch to wooden arrows which fly completely differently, are less customizable, and break easier. This isn't unique to Asiatic bows. Across different organizations, traditional archery is based on shooting method rather than equipment. The NFAA traditional division, for example, has no restrictions on bow material, arrow material, and even allows a short stabilizer. Who puts a stabilizer on a trad bow? And really, the only difference is that the rules specifically disallow string walking and face walking and written memoranda, but otherwise it's the same as modern bare bow, which means this is, by definition, a traditional bow. You can see why I think traditional archery has problems. And that's with competitions that define a traditional class. In Australia, where I shoot, there is no traditional division. So if I want to shoot trad recurve, I go into the open recurve division. But we do have a longbow division, but that specifically limits the type of bow to more or less the American longbow type with wooden or aluminium arrows. When was aluminium traditional? Like I keep saying, I kind of get where the rules come from, Most of these were adapted as technology and technique evolved. The rise of modern materials means that traditional rules need to freeze before too many changes happen. So, aluminium or carbon fiberglass might be okay in some events, but not others. String walking and face walking are relatively new shooting methods that exploit modern bow designs and are just as accurate as sights, so rules on finger placement prevent that. And because of that, it's no longer simple stick and string. Sure, if you're just doing it for fun in your yard, do whatever you want. But it must be so confusing to go to a club with the vision of shooting a traditional bow and being met with a modern recurve or compound culture with far more rules on what is and isn't allowed on a trad bow, if there even is a traditional division or event. I think this is where trad shooters are united. The rules, shoot what you want.